Hello everyone, this is Anne, the Annevangelical Catholic here, with my top 10 female saints. Let us begin with the Queen and Mother of all saints, Mary the Blessed Virgin. She's called or referred to as Blessed Virgin Mary instead of Saint, since the prophecy written in the Gospel of Luke records that all generations will call her blessed, but she is indeed a saint, and more so, the Queen of all saints. And I'd say she's definitely number one because of not only her role in salvation history, not only her title, which is just an extension, sort of like an effect of her role in salvation history, which God brought about, but also just the ripple effect of that she inspires all these saints, and that every saint that I know of and admire has a devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and I do too. And I think of all the saints that I have a devotion to, I think I spend most time with her. To have a devotion is to take the time to pray with that such a saint, and make requests from that saint. And having Mary as a guide is very fitting, since she was the most perfect creature created by God, the most perfect woman, and thus a very great example for everyone, male and female, but I think in a special way for females, of what it means to be the perfect disciple of Jesus Christ. And so that's why I chose her as number one. Just the more I reflect on Mary and who she is, whether it's through meditating upon the mysteries or reading scripture and meditating upon those events where Mary was there and she pondered these things in her heart, and just to think how she indeed magnifies the greatness of the Lord. Not only does she make his light shine brighter, but she makes things that are there in scripture or in God's work all that more clear, like a magnifying glass does, makes things that are small seem bigger and clearer. It's like, I can't read that word, it's so tiny. Oh, she magnified it. Now I can see things that I didn't see before, just by meditating and reflecting on the rosary or scripture and the events of Mary, and it just shows me how glorious God's work is and what he's done through Mary. And then again, magnifying glass not only shows like God's creatures more clearly and his works more clearly, but also it just shows his glory more clearly. It shows who Jesus is more clearly, and just how amazing God is. So, thinking of devotions, I have to move on to a saint who was also very devoted to the Blessed Virgin Mary, Saint Teresa of Lisieux. She got sick and became the patron saint. She became the patron saint of headaches, probably because she herself had this serious headache, and it was partly, I think, spiritual as well as like this emotional and physical problem that she was suffering, that she ended up bedridden. And they brought the statue of Mary, they prayed the rosary, her family, because they're very holy people, and that devotion helped heal her, through Mary's intercession. With Mary's intercession, Saint Therese of Lisieux was healed, and I think that's a pretty amazing thing. Saint Therese of Lisieux is an amazing little saint. I could go on forever on these first two saints, but I haven't the time. I know that Saint Therese of Lisieux's, her key thing is that little way, that she was so much like a child. She embraced that so well, and even at a young age, she insisted that she get to go and join the religious sisters, the nuns, because they're cloistered nuns. She insisted on joining cloistered nuns, and even though she lived a simple life and she didn't pursue anything grand, even though there's nothing wrong with being Saint Teresa of Avila, very well educated, or pursuing a career, or being a woman in the world, or traveling the world, or anything like that. It's not like she wasn't open to those things or didn't want those things, but she knew what her role was, and it's amazing to think that anyone can be a saint because of the simple life that Saint Teresa of Lisieux lived. And if she could live this simple life, then anyone, no matter how simple or complicated, as long as you have that simple mindset in mind of being like a child and trusting everything into God, and you're doing everything in and with and through God, whether it be something simple and you live your life cloistered and yet somehow become the patron saint of missionaries like Saint Teresa of Lisieux, or if you are out in the world, or if you have this grand career, and that, hey, God is using all of that, no matter what your abilities are. And no matter the range, God can make a saint out of you, and has done so with somebody so simple, so little. And I think it's almost harder to be that simple little saint, but remembering that, yeah, you can bring that simplicity and that childlike trust in God wherever you go, even if you become some successful career person, which I hope to become. Again, not doing it for like my own glory, but for God's glory. Speaking of Saint Mother Teresa of Kolkata, how exciting is it to call her saint now, was such an impressive person. She's very humble. She never went out to become famous. She never went out to start controversy, but controversy follows wherever Jesus is truly present. There's going to be controversy, right? When somebody's truly living the faith and just being Jesus here on earth, this is going to cause controversy, and it's going to capture attention and think that she's just this poor sister, that she's not some supermodel or superhero or celebrity. At least she wasn't initially what you would think, like this movie star or anything like that. She was just this humble, simple woman, and I liked her willingness to embrace poverty. Again, I think her humility and willingness to just submit to whatever it is God that asked of her. She was a sister, but she was asked to start her own order, and she did that even though, she didn't know what to expect, and, it was a new thing for her, and she had to ask, special permission to, leave her order and start a new one. But her heart was just so drawn to the will of God and the needs of the poor, and I feel like I can relate to that, serving the needs of the poor, and I hope that I can achieve that, and that in doing God's will, I'm sure that I will. Speaking of hardcore saints, there's so many. I like to mention bringing back to younger saints. Saint Maria Goretti is such a sweet, pure, innocent soul. It's just so amazing that such a young woman, I believe she was 13 years of age, could be a saint in general, but just the saintly life that she lived and unfortunately died. To think that, wow, she forgave the person who stabbed her several times, who tried to sexually assault her. There's no nice way of putting it. She was somebody tried to sexually assault her. He attempted, but he ended up just stabbing her instead, which is still really terrible, and think that she suffered this great evil, and she still was willing to forgive this person, and even after being stabbed several times, as bad as that was, to suffer through that pain while being treated. She couldn't be medicated because she needed to be alert in order to stay alive and keep her blood pressure up. She couldn't drink. She was very thirsty, but she couldn't drink anything because it was her intestines that were pierced. And it's just so sad to think of how much she suffered. But yeah, it's so glorious, and it shows what it really means to be a saint, because she really goes the step beyond by forgiving him after suffering just these horrible evils and this pain and this agony. And she appeared to this young, disturbed man in a dream, and even though he was one of the worst angry, aggressive criminals in the prison, suddenly, by having her appear to him in this dream, giving him 7 white lilies, showing him, I forgive you for each time you stabbed me, and having that, result in this conversion, whether that dream was real or not, we know that her witness and her example was definitely real and very impactful. To think that he changed his life and was there at her canonization, and so was her mother, and to think that her mother was able to forgive her assaulter and everything, just wow, the ripple effect she had after death. And to think that there was this woman who was able to stand up for purity, and that she also cared more about this man's soul than her own soul or her own physical being. Yeah, she cared about that probably, but she's don't do this because you'll go to hell for it. This is the reason you shouldn't do it. Not because I'll go to hell for it, or because, not just because I don't want you to do this, but because it is bad for your soul. And to think that that's what she cared about most, although I'm sure she cared about her physical well-being and all. And I think that's a bolder statement for the sake of chastity and purity in a world that is very unchaste and very impure. And to think that she could convert souls through her prayers to this day is amazing, and definitely need her intercession. So that was pretty intense, but I can't help but think of another very intense saint, Saint Kateri Tekakwitha. She is a Native American saint, and she's very hardcore. I mean, I know being somebody who's a Native American, it doesn't surprise me too much, because, back in those days, they didn't have technology like we do and all the advancements we have. so it's easier maybe for her to be hardcore, or to be hardcore back then. You had to hardly eat any food, and when you ate food, put ashes on it. At least that's what she did. And for them, I guess 24 karat diamonds were purple shells, and she refused to wear those shells. And it was just amazing. Like, okay, I can get why she wouldn't participate in cannibalistic rituals, because unfortunately the Mohawks would eat the hearts of their opponents after they killed them and conquered them, and she wouldn't have nothing to do with that, obviously. But when it came to something like, not wearing jewelry, like shells don't sound to me like very ritzy things, but I mean, in that time and place they were, and she refused to wear those. And to think that she forewent any material possessions, and she suffered being an outcast amongst her own family, and she couldn't really fit in anywhere. She couldn't fit in with her family, who had different religious beliefs and practices, and she was a Native American, so she didn't totally entirely fit in, but she didn't care. She cared about God above all else, and just wanted to serve and to love him, even though people thought she was weird and hardcore. Like us today might think she's hardcore because she's fasted a lot and put ashes in her food whenever she ate, if she ate at all. And people try to discourage her, like, okay, that's great that you love God and everything, you want to live like a religious person. And unfortunately, even though she really wanted to become like a cloistered nun, she couldn't, because they didn't have convents available for her to join at that time. But she lived that sort of like celibate religious lifestyle. And I think the other thing is like celibacy. Again, that's an interesting thing. In a world where people are very promiscuous, here's this someone who chooses willfully to be celibate and to fast. In the world of materialism, somebody who's detached from materialism, and even sometimes goes the extra step to even kind of somewhat deprive herself of nourishment, and saying, okay, fine, I'll eat for nourishment, but I'll make sure it tastes really bad by putting ash in it. It's like, you're making yourself sick, don't do that. But she does it, and it's like, again, saints go a step beyond. Maybe we're not all asked to fast as intensely as Kateri did, and to put ash in our food. There's always that consideration of health, but I think there's also a need for us to go a step beyond. Again, not to the point of compromising our health, but again, to make some more sacrifices, because sometimes maybe we don't go far enough, even though I tend to think that, yeah, Kateri went a little bit too far. Come to think of it, all these women are pretty hardcore. Yeah, even little Saint Therese, I mean, being able to put up with people who annoy her and just genuinely seek in the depths of her heart, like, true love for them, and express that and share that with them. And then when she had enough and would walk away, and wouldn't allow herself to dislike anybody. When she was about to reach her breaking point, she'd walk away, and then, like, okay, when I'm ready to truly genuinely love this person, then I'll come back. And like, all of these women, they blow my mind and they impress me. We'll continue this in part 2. Thanks for listening to this half. I wish I could talk more about these amazing female saints, but research them yourself, and you will see just how amazing they are, and why it is they were canonized by just the miracle of their life, as well as the miracles that were performed through their intercession. Thank you, everyone, and God bless.